She asked for shelter. He gave her a home. Ravi walked along the quiet streets of the city, the soft drizzle making the evening air smell fresh. The sky was a pale gray, and tiny puddles reflected the dim light from the street lamps. He carried his usual leather bag, filled with papers and folders from a long day at work, and tried to ignore the chill creeping through his coat. The streets were almost empty, and the sound of his footsteps echoed faintly against the walls of old buildings. It had been a tiring day, but he felt a quiet satisfaction. Helping others at work gave him purpose, and he liked knowing he could make a small difference. As he passed the main bus stop near the old market, something unusual caught his eye. A young woman was standing there, her coat thin and worn, her hair damp from the rain. She shivered under the shelter, hugging herself tightly. Her eyes were downcast, and her small frame looked fragile against the cold evening. Ravi paused, noticing that she wasn't just waiting for a bus. Her expression carried worry, fear, and exhaustion. For a moment, he considered walking past. It was easy to think that someone else might help, or that maybe she would find her way. But something about the way she looked, so lost, so alone, stayed with him. His feet slowed, and finally he stopped a few steps away, keeping a respectful distance. "Excuse me," he said gently, his voice soft but warm. She looked up, startled, as if she had been caught in her thoughts. Her eyes were wide, and she quickly looked down again, biting her lip. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman hesitated. She seemed uncertain whether to trust him, and Ravi could sense the tension in her posture. But finally she nodded slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't have anywhere to go tonight," she said. I just need shelter." Ravi's heart tightened. He had seen people struggle in the city before, but there was a raw honesty in her words, a quiet courage that went with the fear. Helping people was something he believed in, not for praise or recognition, but because it was simply right. He looked at her coat, soaked through, and then at her shoes, which had thin soles and were dirty from the rain. He knew she couldn't have walked far in these conditions. "Do you want to come somewhere warm?" he asked. She hesitated again, her eyes flicking around as if weighing her options. Finally, she nodded, and he smiled gently. "There's a small cafe nearby. You can sit and warm up, and then we'll figure things out." She followed him silently, her steps cautious. Ravi noticed how she seemed careful not to get too close, and he respected that. Trust wasn't something that could be forced. It had to be earned. The cafe was small, with warm lights and the soft hum of conversation. A few customers sipped tea or coffee, reading newspapers or chatting quietly. Ravi led her to an empty table near the corner, away from most of the crowd. He ordered 2 cups of tea, hoping the warmth would help her relax. When the drinks arrived, he set one in front of her. She looked down at it, then up at him, and for the first time a small smile appeared on her face. It was tentative, almost shy, but it made Ravi feel a sense of relief. She was not just surviving the storm outside. She was beginning to feel safe, even if only a little. "I'm Ravi," he said, offering his hand politely. She hesitated, then shook it lightly. "Aisha," she replied. Her voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it, a quiet determination that hinted at the life she had lived before this moment. "Why are you out here in this rain, Aisha?" he asked carefully, not wanting to push too hard, but genuinely curious. She took a deep breath, her hands tightening around the warm cup. I had no choice," she said. "I left home. I couldn't stay there anymore. I didn't want to, but I had no other place to go." Ravi nodded slowly. He understood a little. Life could be difficult in ways that others didn't see. People carried struggles hidden behind polite smiles, and sometimes the world demanded more courage than anyone realized. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You did what you had to do. Right now, let's just focus on keeping you warm." She sipped her tea, her hands trembling slightly from the cold. Ravi noticed that she kept glancing at the door and the street outside, as if preparing for the next challenge. He didn't want to overwhelm her, so he stayed silent, letting the noise of the cafe and the rain outside fill the space. Sometimes, simply being there was enough. After a few minutes, he spoke again, gently. "Do you have anywhere to stay tonight? Even a friend's place?" She shook her head, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. "No," she whispered. I don't know anyone I can trust right now. I need a place to be safe." Ravi felt a mixture of compassion and concern. He knew that offering help wasn't always simple, but in this moment, he knew he couldn't leave her out in the rain. "I can help," he said softly. "I have a small apartment nearby. You can stay there tonight, at least until we figure things out. You'll be safe." She looked at him uncertain, as if she had never expected kindness to come so easily. I can't impose, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Ravi said firmly but gently. Everyone deserves help when they need it. You're not imposing. I just want to make sure you're safe tonight. There was a long pause. Isha studied his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hidden motives. She saw none. Only kindness and sincerity. Slowly she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. Ravi offered her an umbrella and they walked together to his apartment. The rain had slowed, leaving the city streets glistening under the dim lights. Isha's steps were careful, but her shoulders seemed a little less tense. They didn't speak much, but Ravi felt that silence wasn't awkward. It was a quiet understanding between two strangers, one of whom had suddenly found hope. When they arrived at his apartment, Ravi unlocked the door and gestured inside. Make yourself comfortable, he said. There's tea and a warm blanket if you need it. She stepped in hesitantly, glancing around the small, neatly kept apartment. It wasn't large, but it was warm and tidy, filled with the quiet calm of someone who cared for their own space. She set down her bag and looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, she said softly. Ravi nodded. You're welcome, you don't need to say more. Just rest and dry off. We'll talk later if you want. For the first time in many nights, Isha felt a sense of relief wash over her. The fear and exhaustion didn't disappear completely, but she realized that there was someone she could trust. Someone who had offered not just shelter, but safety and respect. Ravi left her for a moment to bring a blanket and some warm water. When he returned, he found her sitting quietly by the window, staring at the city lights reflecting off the wet streets. She didn't speak, but her eyes seemed to ask a question without words. Can I really stay here? Yes, he said simply. You can stay, you're safe. She nodded, a small smile forming. It was fragile, but it carried hope. And for Ravi, that tiny smile was enough to know that this encounter was the beginning of something important. Not just a simple act of kindness, but the start of a story about trust, courage, and human connection. The rain continued outside, pattering softly against the windows, but inside the apartment there was warmth, quiet, and the beginning of a new bond. Neither of them knew exactly what the future would hold, but in that moment, the simple act of offering shelter had changed the course of both their lives. The next morning, Aisha woke up to the soft sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time in many nights, she had slept without fear. The blanket Ravi had given her kept her warm, and the quiet of the apartment was comforting. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, thinking about the events of the previous evening. Everything had felt so sudden, yet somehow safe. She glanced around the small apartment, noticing the neatness and simplicity of Ravi's home. Everything was in its place, quiet, orderly, and welcoming, a sharp contrast to the chaos she had left behind. Ravi was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. When he noticed her stirring, he smiled gently. Good morning, he said softly. I hope you slept well. Aisha hesitated, unsure what to say. Yes, thank you, she finally replied, her voice quiet but sincere. There was a pause, as if she was gathering courage to speak further. I didn't expect anyone to help me like this, she said. People usually ignore someone like me. Ravi shook his head. It's not right to ignore people who need help. Everyone deserves safety and kindness. You're not different, Isha. She looked down at her hands, folding them in her lap. I don't even know how to thank you, she whispered. Ravi waved his hand lightly. You don't have to. Just rest and feel safe. That's enough for now. Breakfast was simple, toast, eggs, and some fruit Ravi had in the kitchen. Aisha watched as he moved around the small apartment, quietly preparing food. She noticed how calm and organized he was, how small acts like making tea or cleaning the dishes were done with care. It made her feel even more comfortable. She realized that being here wasn't just about shelter, it was about feeling like someone cared. After breakfast, Ravi sat across from her, careful not to push too much. We should talk about what comes next, he said gently. You can't stay here forever, and I want to make sure you're safe while figuring things out. Aisha nodded, her hands resting on the table. I know I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any friends nearby. I don't even know if my family will let me come back. Her voice wavered, and Ravi could see the pain in her eyes. I feel lost. Ravi leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. It's okay to feel lost. But you don't have to face everything alone. We'll take it one step at a time. First, we make sure you're safe. Then we figure out work, documents, and a place to live. Everything else can follow. She nodded again, feeling a small weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to carry all her burdens by herself. There was someone willing to help, someone who believed she deserved safety and respect. The days that followed were a mix of quiet routines and small steps toward trust. Isha spent the mornings organizing her belongings, drying clothes, and getting used to the warmth and calm of Ravi's apartment. She would sit by the window sometimes, watching the city move, the people walking with umbrellas, the cars splashing through puddles. The world outside continued, but inside there was a moment of peace she hadn't felt in years. Ravi never rushed her. He understood that trust couldn't be forced. He gave her space, but he also offered help when she needed it. He would prepare meals, bring warm water for her, and sometimes simply sit quietly, letting her presence feel safe. They developed a routine: tea in the morning, small conversations about work or the news, short walks in the nearby park, and quiet evenings with a book or soft music. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, Isha spoke hesitantly. "Ravi, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, smiling gently. "Why are you helping me? You barely know me. You don't even have to do this." Ravi looked at her calmly. "Because it's the right thing to do. Everyone needs help sometimes. You're not a stranger in need of judgment. You're a human being. And you deserve kindness just like anyone else." Isha felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Usually people judged, ignored, or offered help with conditions. But Ravi's words were simple, honest, and without expectation. For the first time, she felt she could trust someone fully. As the days turned into a week, Isha began to feel more comfortable in the apartment. She started helping with small chores, washing dishes, organizing her things, and even cooking simple meals. She wanted to contribute, to show gratitude, and to regain some sense of independence. Ravi noticed this quietly, never demanding, always encouraging. One evening, as they shared dinner, Isha spoke again. I want to find work. I want to support myself, not just rely on you." Ravi nodded, pleased. "That's a good idea. I can help you with your resume and applications. We'll take it step by step." It wasn't easy. Isha had gaps in her education and work experience, and some employers were hesitant. She faced rejection more than once, each time feeling discouraged. But Ravi never let her lose hope. He reminded her of her strengths, her courage to leave an unsafe home, and her willingness to keep trying. Slowly, she started applying to small jobs, gaining confidence with each interview. Trust between them deepened naturally. Isha began to share more about her life, her childhood, the difficulties she had faced, and her dreams for the future. Ravi listened, never interrupting, never judging. He shared small details about his own life, enough to make her feel comfortable, but always keeping the focus on her needs and feelings. Some evenings, they would sit together quietly, sharing tea and soft conversation. Isha would sometimes read aloud from a book, and Ravi would listen, occasionally commenting or asking questions. Other nights, they would simply sit in silence, the comfort of shared space enough to ease loneliness. She realized that companionship didn't have to be loud or dramatic. It could simply be presence, patience, and understanding. There were challenges, too. Isha occasionally felt overwhelmed, memories of her past making her anxious or sad. On those days, she would retreat to her corner of the apartment, and Ravi would give her space. He never pushed her to talk until she was ready. Sometimes, a simple gesture, a cup of tea, a warm blanket, or sitting nearby quietly was all she needed to feel supported. One rainy afternoon, Isha broke down, unable to hold back tears. She admitted that she missed her family, that she was scared of the world, and that she didn't know if she could handle the challenges ahead. Ravi sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay to be afraid," he said softly. "It doesn't make you weak. It means you're human, and you don't have to face anything alone. We'll get through this together." That moment marked a turning point. Isha realized that asking for help wasn't a weakness. It was a step toward strength, toward rebuilding her life. Ravi's quiet support gave her the courage to keep moving forward, to face the world outside the apartment with hope instead of fear. Over time, their routines became natural. Isha began cooking more, sometimes surprising Ravi with small dishes she had learned from her childhood. Ravi continued working, but always made time for her, helping her prepare for interviews, teaching her small life skills, and listening to her stories. Their bond was no longer about stranger and helper. It had become a relationship built on trust, patience, and mutual respect. Neighbors who initially looked at Ravi's actions with curiosity slowly noticed the change too. They saw a young woman, once shy and timid, now walking with more confidence, smiling more often, and interacting politely with others. They saw a man who quietly cared not for recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Slowly, whispers of respect replaced questions of doubt. As weeks passed, Aisha began to take small steps toward independence. She secured a part-time job at a nearby store, learning to manage her schedule, interact with customers, and handle responsibilities. Ravi encouraged her every step of the way, proud of her resilience. At the same time, she continued contributing to the household, helping with cooking, cleaning, and small chores. The apartment, once just a temporary refuge, began to feel like a shared home. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Isha spoke with a quiet smile. "Ravi, I never thought I could feel this safe. I never thought anyone would trust me or care for me like this." Ravi looked at her, calm and kind. "You deserved it all along. You're brave and you've faced more than most people could imagine. Trust is earned, yes, but you've earned it too by being honest, patient, and determined. That's why you're here, not just as a guest, but as someone important." Isha felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude and hope, not fear. She realized that shelter was only the beginning. What mattered more was trust, understanding, and the quiet strength of someone who cared without asking for anything in return. And so life continued. Each day brought small victories: her first paycheck, her first successful task at work, a small meal she cooked perfectly. Each day also brought challenges, but now she faced them knowing she was not alone. Ravi was there, quietly supporting, guiding, and respecting her as she rebuilt her life. In those quiet weeks, Aisha learned an important lesson: that human kindness could be simple, powerful, and transformative. One small act, offering shelter, had grown into a bond that gave her courage, hope, and the ability to dream again. The apartment, once just walls and a roof, had become a place of trust, comfort, and growth. And Aisha knew that while the road ahead was long, she had the strength and the support to walk it. Life for Aisha had begun to settle into a new rhythm, but it wasn't without challenges. Every day brought small victories, yet also new obstacles that tested her courage and patience. The part-time job she had secured was not glamorous, but it gave her a sense of purpose and independence she had never experienced before. Early mornings at the small store, interacting with customers, learning the routine of keeping shelves stocked, and managing small cash transactions were all learning experiences. She sometimes felt overwhelmed, especially when tasks piled up or when customers were impatient, but she remembered Ravi's words: "You've faced more than this. You can handle it." Ravi continued to support her quietly, never imposing, but always ready to step in when she needed guidance. He helped her plan her schedule so that she could manage work and the apartment responsibilities. Sometimes, after a long day at work, Aisha would return tired, only to be greeted with a cup of tea or a warm smile. It was a small gesture, but it reminded her that she was not alone. Despite the growing stability, Aisha occasionally struggled with fear and doubt. Memories of her past, the abusive household she had escaped, the loneliness of being rejected or ignored, would resurface unexpectedly. On some evenings, she would sit by the window, staring at the dim city lights, feeling vulnerable. She sometimes wondered if she had made the right choices, if she would ever truly be independent, and if she could trust people again. Ravi noticed these moments. He never pressured her to talk, but his calm presence reassured her. "It's okay to feel scared," he said gently one evening as she returned from work, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Fear doesn't mean failure, it means you are human and you are trying. That's what matters." Those words were simple, yet they carried deep comfort. Aisha realized that trust and patience weren't just about safety. They were about having someone who accepted her feelings without judgment, who helped her face the world without making her feel small or unworthy. One day, as she was preparing for her shift at the store, Ravi handed her a small notebook. "I thought this might help," he said softly. "You can write down your goals, your thoughts, or even the small achievements you feel proud of. It can help you see how far you've come." Aisha accepted the notebook hesitantly, unsure how to respond. But that evening, after returning from work, she opened it and began writing. At first, it was just a few words. "I went to work today," I greeted a customer politely. "I managed the cash register without mistakes." But slowly, the entries grew. She wrote about the small meals she cooked, the chores she completed, the conversations she had with coworkers, and even the moments when she felt proud of herself for standing up to her fears. Writing became a daily habit, a quiet way to recognize her progress. It reminded her that even small victories mattered, and that her life was gradually becoming her own. Ravi never commented on her writing unless she shared it willingly. Instead, he gave her space to celebrate her achievements quietly, letting her confidence grow naturally. Yet challenges continued to appear. Aisha had to manage not only her work and personal growth, but also the complexities of city life, commuting long distances, dealing with difficult customers, and navigating administrative tasks she had never handled before. At times, the exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, and she wondered if she could keep going. During one particularly challenging week, her store manager asked her to take on extra shifts due to staff shortages. The schedule was demanding, and Aisha worried about managing both work and her responsibilities at the apartment. She felt frustrated and anxious, questioning whether she could handle so much at once. Ravi noticed her tension as soon as she returned home. "You're stressed," he said calmly as she sank into a chair with a sigh. "Let's figure this out together. You don't have to do everything alone." With his help, Aisha made a plan. She discussed her concerns with the manager, explaining her situation honestly but professionally. To her surprise, the manager was understanding and adjusted her schedule. It was a small victory, but it gave Aisha the confidence to speak up for herself when she needed to. Meanwhile, their bond continued to strengthen. Aisha and Ravi developed a pattern of mutual support. Mornings were filled with small routines, preparing breakfast, planning the day, and sharing quiet conversations. Evenings were calm, with discussions about work, news, or small personal stories from the past. On weekends, they sometimes took short walks in the park or visited local markets, enjoying simple moments together. One rainy afternoon, as they sat together after tea, Aisha spoke softly. "Ravi, I never thought I could feel this comfortable with someone. I mean really comfortable, not just safe, but understood." Ravi looked at her quietly, letting her words sink in. "That's because you're brave enough to trust again," he said. "It takes courage to open up, and you've done that. That's why we can have this peace, this trust." Aisha smiled faintly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that the apartment was no longer just a place of refuge. It was a space where she could grow, make mistakes, learn, and be herself without fear of judgment. She felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. However, life was not always smooth. Aisha occasionally received calls from people from her past, friends who had moved away, distant relatives, and even her family. Some calls brought joy, while others reopened old wounds. She struggled to balance the desire to reconnect with her need to protect herself. Ravi was there to listen, offering guidance without forcing opinions. "Trust has to be earned," he reminded her gently one evening as she shared a difficult call with him. "You decide who you let in and when. There's no rush, and there's no shame in protecting yourself." Over time, Aisha also began reconnecting with a few distant relatives who had genuinely wanted to help. She learned to navigate these relationships carefully, setting boundaries while appreciating support. Each small connection strengthened her confidence, showing her that the world could be both safe and nurturing when approached with caution and care. As weeks turned into months, Aisha became more independent. She managed her work, her personal life, and the apartment routines with confidence. She even began helping others, quietly offering support to colleagues who struggled or sharing small advice with friends who needed guidance. She had learned that kindness and understanding were not just gifts she received, they were also tools she could use to make a positive impact. Ravi watched her growth with quiet pride. He never boasted about his role, nor did he expect recognition. For him, seeing Aisha regain her independence and confidence was reward enough. Their relationship had evolved into a deep bond based on respect, trust, and shared humanity. One evening, as they shared tea by the window, Aisha looked out at the city lights reflecting on the wet streets. "Ravi, I feel like I can finally breathe," she said softly. "I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living and it feels real." Ravi nodded, his expression calm but warm. "That's because you've worked hard, Aisha. You faced your fears, took small steps every day, and never gave up. You deserve to feel alive and free." For Aisha, the apartment had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary where she had rediscovered herself. She had learned to trust, to hope, and to embrace life again. The journey had not been easy, but it had taught her resilience, patience, and the value of quiet, consistent support. Even as she grew stronger, Aisha never forgot the small acts that had brought her this far: the warm cup of tea, the gentle words, the patient listening. She realized that kindness could change lives, not in grand gestures but in small, thoughtful actions. Ravi's support had been that consistent, quiet force, a steady hand guiding her toward safety, independence, and self-respect. And so life continued with its mix of work, challenges, and small joys. Aisha had learned to balance independence with trust, strength with vulnerability. She had discovered that asking for help was not weakness, but wisdom. And through it all, Ravi remained by her side, not as a guardian or a protector, but as a friend, mentor, and witness to her transformation. The apartment, once a temporary refuge, had become a place of growth, trust, and hope. Aisha's journey was far from over, but she now faced the future with courage, confidence, and the knowledge that she was not alone. The struggles of the past had shaped her, but the kindness she had received and returned had shown her the path to a brighter, more independent life. Months had passed since Aisha first stepped into Ravi's apartment on that rainy evening. Life had changed in ways she had never imagined. The small victories of work, daily routines, and personal growth had transformed into confidence, independence, and a sense of purpose. She had grown stronger, not only physically and mentally, but emotionally, learning to trust herself and others again. Aisha now managed her job with ease. She had gained the respect of her colleagues, who admired her patience and reliability. Customers appreciated her calm and friendly nature, and even her manager often praised her dedication. It was far from an easy life. Early mornings, long hours, and small daily challenges still existed, but Aisha faced them with a quiet determination that was new to her. She had learned to plan her days, prioritize her responsibilities, and take care of herself without feeling guilty or dependent. Ravi watched her progress with quiet pride. He never boasted about his role in her journey, nor did he expect thanks or recognition. But each time she returned home from work, tired but smiling, he felt a sense of satisfaction. He had offered a safe place, but it was Aisha who had rebuilt her life. He had provided support and guidance, but she had taken the steps forward. One weekend, Aisha came home from work with a small envelope in her hand. She held it out to Ravi with a shy smile. "This is my first paycheck," she said. "I wanted to give it to you for all the support you've given me." Ravi shook his head gently. "You earned this yourself. You don't have to give it to me. Keep it. Use it for your needs, for your future." Aisha paused, looking down, then smiled. "I know, but I wanted to share it with you to show my gratitude. You've helped me when I had nothing. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Ravi accepted the gesture quietly, understanding her intent. "I am proud of you, Aisha, not because of the paycheck, but because of the courage, patience, and effort you've shown. That's what truly matters." It was a simple exchange, yet it held meaning deeper than words could describe. Aisha realized that her independence did not mean leaving behind gratitude or connection. It meant acknowledging help, growing from it, and moving forward with dignity. The next step in her journey was finding her own home. Aisha wanted a space where she could live independently, take control of her life, and continue growing without feeling like she was relying on someone else. Ravi supported her decision, helping her search for a small apartment nearby. They visited several places together, discussing budgets, locations, and safety. Finally, Aisha found a modest apartment, small but bright, with sunlight streaming through the windows and enough space for her to feel comfortable. Moving day was both exciting and emotional. Ravi helped Aisha carry boxes, arrange furniture, and settle in. They laughed as they struggled to fit a large shelf into a narrow hallway and smiled at the little details that made the apartment feel like home. For Aisha, it was a new beginning, a place of independence, yet still connected to the life she had built with Ravi's support. Once settled, Aisha invited Ravi for tea in her new home. She had prepared small snacks, set up the table neatly, and even decorated the apartment with small touches that reflected her personality. Ravi looked around, impressed by the warmth and care she had put into her space. "You've done a wonderful job," he said, smiling. Aisha blushed slightly. "I wanted it to feel mine, a place where I can grow, work, and live fully, but I wanted to share this moment with you because without your support I wouldn't have been able to do it." Ravi sat down, sipping the tea she had poured. "This is your achievement, Aisha. I only walked beside you for a part of the journey. You took every step yourself." As they talked, Aisha realized how far she had come. The girl who had once stood shivering under a rainy bus stop, unsure if she could trust anyone, had become a confident young woman. She managed her job, her finances, and her new home. She had learned to handle challenges, make decisions, and care for herself. The experience had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of human kindness. But perhaps the most valuable lesson was about trust and connection. Aisha had learned that trust could be rebuilt, that people could care without expecting anything in return, and that kindness could change lives. Ravi had shown her this through his actions, consistent, quiet, and unwavering. In the weeks that followed, Aisha settled into her new routine. She continued her job, occasionally meeting friends she had reconnected with, and even started small projects to improve her life, like learning new skills and attending local workshops. Each day was filled with purpose, yet she always found time to pause, reflect, and appreciate the journey she had taken. Ravi remained a part of her life, but now in a different role. No longer a caretaker or guardian, he was a friend, mentor, and trusted companion. They often met for tea, walks, or quiet conversations. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, sharing the peace that came from mutual respect and understanding. Their relationship had evolved naturally, from strangers to support to true friendship. One evening, as they walked through the park near Aisha's new home, she spoke softly. "Ravi, I feel like I can finally live my life fully. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not running from anything. I feel ready." Ravi looked at her, his calm smile reflecting pride and warmth. "You've earned that, Aisha. You've worked hard, faced challenges, and grown stronger every day. You deserve this freedom, this confidence, and this peace." Aisha smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She thought about the journey, the fear, the uncertainty, the small victories, and the lessons learned. She realized that life was a series of steps, some small, some large, but every step mattered, and she had taken each one with courage, guidance, and determination. Over time, Aisha also began giving back. She quietly helped friends who struggled, offered advice to coworkers, and even supported others who faced challenges similar to those she had overcome. Her own experiences had taught her empathy, and she wanted to use her journey to inspire and support others. Her bond with Ravi remained strong, but it was no longer defined by dependence. It was mutual respect, genuine friendship, and a shared understanding of life's struggles. They celebrated small milestones together: the completion of her first big project at work, her first independent purchase for her apartment, and even quiet moments of reflection and laughter. Aisha's family, who had once been distant or unsupportive, began to respect her choices and independence. She learned to navigate these relationships carefully, balancing her boundaries with appreciation for genuine concern. She realized that maturity wasn't just about independence, but also about managing relationships with wisdom and compassion. As months turned into a year, Aisha's life felt stable, meaningful, and hopeful. She had learned that shelter was only the beginning. True security came from trust, growth, and the courage to face the world. She understood that kindness, both received and given, was transformative, and she knew that Ravi's support had been the foundation on which she rebuilt her life. One quiet evening, as she prepared dinner in her new kitchen, she paused and smiled. She remembered the rainy night when she had first asked for shelter, the fear that had gripped her, and the kindness of a stranger who had offered her safety without judgment. She realized that this act had changed everything, not just her circumstances, but her life itself. Later, Ravi visited her apartment for tea, and they shared stories of the past, laughed about small mishaps, and reflected on how much had changed. "You've built a beautiful life, Aisha," Ravi said, genuinely pleased. "I'm honored to have been part of your journey." "And I'm grateful," she replied, "not just for the shelter, but for the trust, patience, and kindness you showed me. You taught me that people can be good, that life can be safe, and that I can find strength even when I feel weak." Ravi nodded. "You found your strength, Aisha. I only helped you see it." The evening passed with warmth, laughter, and quiet reflection. For Aisha, the apartment was more than a home. It was proof of resilience, courage, and the power of human kindness. She knew the road ahead would continue to have challenges, but now she had confidence, independence, and a network of support. Her journey had come full circle. What began as a simple request for shelter had grown into a story of transformation, trust, and hope. Aisha had regained her independence, rebuilt her life, and learned lessons that would guide her for years to come. Ravi's quiet presence had shown her that kindness, consistency, and respect could change lives, and she carried those lessons forward in her own life. On her first night alone in her new apartment, Aisha stood by the window, looking at the city lights glimmering on the streets below. She felt a deep sense of peace. She had survived the storm of her past, faced the challenges of the present, and stepped into a future filled with hope. And she knew with quiet certainty that life was not about the difficulties one faced, but about the courage to keep moving forward, the wisdom to accept help when needed, and the generosity to help others along the way. In that moment, she whispered a silent thank you, not just to Ravi, but to life itself, for giving her the chance to rebuild, to grow, and to truly call a place her home. The journey had been long, but it had shaped her into someone who could face anything with hope, courage, and gratitude. And for Aisha, that was the most valuable home she could ever have. One built not just with walls and furniture, but with trust, love, and the quiet strength of human kindness.